And what exactly is your rank, Miss Technician?
The laughter came instantly. 8 Navy SEALs filled the narrow corridor outside the UAV control room at Naval Operations Center, Kodiak. Broad shoulders, confident smiles. Men accustomed to being the toughest people in every room they entered. At their center stood Admiral Victor Harlow. His silver insignia gleamed beneath the fluorescent lights as he looked down at the woman seated behind the control console. She appeared completely ordinary. 5'6", plain contractor uniform, no rank, no decorations. No indication she belonged anywhere near sensitive military systems. The Admiral crossed his arms. "I asked you a question." The woman slowly turned toward him. Her blue eyes were calm, cold, steady. The kind of eyes that had seen things most people spent their lives trying to avoid. "What is your rank?" For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then she answered, "Higher than yours, sir." The corridor went still. A few operators exchanged confused glances. The woman looked directly into the Admiral's eyes. "You just don't know it yet." The silence lasted less than a second. Then the room exploded with laughter. Someone slapped a wall. Another nearly dropped his coffee. Lieutenant Ethan Mercer laughed harder than anyone. Even Admiral Harlow grinned. To them, it was the funniest thing they had heard all week. A civilian contractor claiming she outranked an admiral. Ridiculous. Embarrassing. Delusional. The woman simply turned back to her console. She said nothing else. She didn't defend herself. Didn't argue. Didn't react. But beneath the sleeve of her uniform rested scars from a battlefield thousands of miles away. Beneath her false identity existed a name, buried in classified files. And buried even deeper was a mission that had already cost innocent lives. For 3 months, she had allowed people to underestimate her. For 3 months, she had listened to every insult, every joke, every whisper. Because while they were laughing at her, she was hunting them. And before this was over, one admiral, one general, and an entire network of traitors would learn a lesson they would never forget. Some people carry rank, others carry justice. Commander Vivian Cross carried both. The only difference was that nobody knew it yet. 3 months earlier, snow drifted across the edges of Naval Operations Center Kodiak, while freezing winds rolled in from the Alaskan coast. The base never truly slept. Jets launched before dawn. Maintenance crews worked through the night. Encrypted communications flowed endlessly through secure networks connecting the facility to military operations around the world. Vivian Cross arrived just before sunrise, carrying a small duffel bag and a contractor identification badge. According to official records, she was a civilian systems analyst, assigned to improve network reliability. According to classified records, she didn't exist. Officially, Commander Vivian Cross had died 2 years earlier during a convoy attack in northern Iraq. The military had buried an empty coffin. A memorial wall carried her name. Families had mourned. Friends had grieved. The world believed she was gone. That illusion was exactly what made her useful. Project Phantom Horizon specialized in operations nobody could acknowledge publicly. Its agents infiltrated criminal networks, hostile governments, and occasionally military institutions themselves. Their job was simple: find corruption, expose it, destroy it. 3 months ago, intelligence analysts discovered evidence suggesting classified operational data was being sold from inside the U.S. military. Several special operations missions had failed under suspicious circumstances. Operators had died. Assets had vanished. Enemy forces somehow knew exactly where American personnel would be. Someone was leaking information. Someone powerful. Vivian volunteered immediately. She knew why. Because one of those compromised missions had been hers. Every night she still saw flashes of that convoy, the burning vehicles, the screams. Staff Sergeant Noah Bennett, pulling security despite a shattered leg. Corporal Ryan Fletcher asking through blood-covered lips if they had been betrayed. Neither man survived. Those memories followed her everywhere, even now. Especially now. The control room door opened. Voices echoed down the hallway. Vivian quickly minimized the access log she had been reviewing. Admiral Victor Harlow entered with several Navy SEAL officers. The atmosphere shifted instantly. People straightened, Conversations stopped. Harlow enjoyed attention. He carried himself like a man who expected admiration. Unfortunately, admiration wasn't enough. He demanded it. His eyes landed on Vivian, again. The same way they had every day for the past 3 months. Like she was something irritating, stuck to the bottom of his boot. "Morning, Contractor." His tone made the word sound like an insult. Vivian nodded politely. "Good morning, sir." Lieutenant Ethan Mercer smirked from behind the Admiral. "Careful, Admiral. She might outrank you." The group laughed. Vivian returned her attention to the monitor. Inside, she felt nothing. No anger. No embarrassment. Just focus. Because while they spent their energy mocking her, she had already discovered something disturbing, and by tomorrow morning, she intended to learn exactly who was hiding behind it. Vivian Cross waited until long after midnight before leaving the control room. The corridors of Naval Operations Center Kodiak had finally grown quiet. Most personnel were asleep. The night shift had settled into its rhythm. Only the constant hum of servers and distant mechanical systems broke the silence. For Vivian, this was the best part of the day. Fewer eyes. Fewer interruptions. More opportunities to work. She entered her small contractor quarters and locked the door behind her. The room was barely larger than a prison cell. A narrow bed, a metal desk, a chair, a single window overlooking a frozen stretch of coastline. Most civilians would have complained. Vivian barely noticed. She had slept in worse places, far worse. She sat at the desk and opened her encrypted tablet. Instantly, hundreds of data points appeared across the screen. User access logs, financial records, communication traffic, cross-reference timelines, patterns hidden beneath patterns. The deeper she dug, the more convinced she became that someone inside the base was selling classified information. The problem was proving who. She rubbed tired eyes. The clock read 1:43. Normally she would stop. Normally she would force herself to sleep. But tonight was different. A particular access record refused to leave her mind. An operational file had been opened 3 weeks earlier. Nothing unusual there, except the file had been accessed at 3:17 in the morning from a secured office by someone who officially wasn't even on base. Vivian enlarged the record, studied it again and again. Something wasn't right. The timestamp had been altered, not enough to fool her, but enough to fool most people. Someone was covering tracks, someone experienced. Someone who understood military systems. A sudden flash exploded inside her mind, not on the screen. A memory. Fire. Smoke. Screaming. Her breath caught. The tablet slipped slightly in her hands. Northern Iraq. 2 years earlier, the convoy moved through a narrow valley surrounded by rocky hills. Everything had appeared normal. Routine. Predictable. Then the first explosion hit. The lead vehicle disappeared in a wall of fire. The second blast flipped an armored truck onto its side. Machine gun fire erupted from elevated positions. Perfect kill zone. Perfect timing. Perfect intelligence. Someone had known exactly where they would be. Vivian could still hear Staff Sergeant Noah Bennett shouting orders through the chaos. Could still see him dragging wounded operators to cover, despite blood pouring from his leg. She remembered Ryan Fletcher crawling toward her, face pale. Body broken, his voice trembling. "Viv." Blood spilled from his lips. "Tell me the truth." Another explosion shook the valley. Were we betrayed? Vivian never answered. She never got the chance. Ryan died 30 seconds later. The memory hit her like a physical blow. Even now. Even after 2 years, she closed her eyes. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. Hold. Again. Again. Slowly the shaking stopped. But the guilt remained. Always. Because she had survived. Noah hadn't. Ryan hadn't. Logan Reed hadn't. 17 others hadn't. And every investigation afterward had ended with the same conclusion. Insufficient evidence. Operational failure. Enemy luck. Vivian knew better. Operators didn't die in perfectly timed ambushes without help. Somebody had sold them. Somebody had taken money and traded lives. That was why she volunteered for Project Phantom Horizon. Not for promotion. Not for recognition. Not for medals. For justice. Her tablet suddenly chimed. A notification appeared. New access detected. Vivian straightened immediately. The fatigue vanished. Someone was inside the system, right now.
The access originated from a secured administrative server.
Level 4 permissions. Highly unusual. She opened the activity log, watched the movement in real time. File after file, record after record. Whoever it was moved carefully, professionally. Almost like they knew exactly which information mattered. Then the activity stopped. Gone. Less than 30 seconds. Just enough time to leave questions behind. Vivian copied everything, encrypted it, stored it. Her instincts screamed that this mattered. The same feeling she used to get before missions went bad, before gunfire, before betrayal. Outside, snow continued falling across Kodiak. Inside, Vivian stared at the screen. For the first time since arriving at the base, she felt something shift. The investigation was no longer passive. Someone else was moving. Someone else was searching. And deep down, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The person responsible for northern Iraq was closer than she had ever imagined. Vivian Cross slept for exactly 3 hours. Not because she needed less sleep than everyone else, because years of special operations training had taught her a simple truth. Sleep when you can. Work when you must. At 4:30, she was already back inside the operations center. Most of the base remained dark. The hallways were nearly empty. Only maintenance crews and overnight watch personnel moved through the building. Perfect. The fewer people around, the easier it was to think. Vivian entered the UAV control room, carrying a coffee she had no intention of drinking. The overnight operator looked exhausted. "Morning," he muttered. "Morning. Everything's normal. No issues." She nodded. "Thanks." He left without another word. The door closed. Vivian immediately moved to a secured terminal. Within seconds, she reopened the activity logs from the previous night. The unusual access record was still there, but something had changed. Her eyes narrowed. Someone had modified the metadata again. Not deleted. Not removed. Adjusted. Tiny changes. Almost invisible. The kind only a trained investigator would notice. Whoever was cleaning the records knew exactly what they were doing. Vivian copied the new information into encrypted storage. A pattern was beginning to emerge, and that pattern frightened her, because it suggested the leak wasn't just intelligent. The leak was experienced. Military experienced. The kind of person who had spent years learning how investigations worked. The kind of person who knew exactly how to stay hidden. Hours later, the base came alive. Personnel filled the corridors. Doors opened and closed. Voices echoed through the building. The normal rhythm returned. Unfortunately, so did Admiral Victor Harlow. He entered the control room with Lieutenant Ethan Mercer and several SEAL officers. Their laughter announced them before they appeared. Mercer pointed toward Vivian. "There she is, the future Admiral." The group laughed. Vivian ignored them. Harlow stopped beside her desk. "Still staring at computer screens, Contractor." "Part of the job, sir. Must be exciting." Mercer smirked. "Careful, Admiral. She probably runs the Pentagon from that chair." More laughter. Vivian kept typing. Inside, however, she was studying every face in the room. Every reaction. Every movement. Every habit. Most people revealed themselves eventually. The arrogant ones usually revealed themselves first. Harlow leaned closer. "You know, there's a reason people earn command." Vivian finally looked up. "And what's that, sir?" "Responsibility." His smile widened. "Some people lead." His gaze drifted deliberately toward her contractor badge. "Others take notes." The room erupted again. Vivian returned her attention to the monitor. "Understood, sir." The lack of reaction seemed to irritate him more than any argument could have. He left 10 minutes later. Mercer followed. The room finally quieted, but something felt wrong. Vivian couldn't explain it. Not yet. Only that familiar sensation. The same one she'd felt before ambushes, before firefights, before betrayal. That evening, she returned to her quarters. The moment she stepped inside, she froze. Nothing appeared unusual. The bed remained made. The desk looked untouched. The window was closed. But Vivian immediately knew. Someone had been here. Her pulse slowed. Training took over. She quietly closed the door behind her, studied the room. The chair sat 2 inches farther from the desk. A notebook had shifted slightly. The corner of a drawer wasn't fully aligned. Tiny details. Invisible to most people. Obvious to her. Someone had searched the room carefully. Professionally. She moved to the desk, opened the drawer. Everything remained inside. Nothing missing. That wasn't good. A thief steals. An investigator searches. Whoever entered wasn't looking for valuables. They were looking for evidence. Vivian checked the hidden security marker she had placed beneath the desk before leaving. A single strand of transparent filament. Broken. Confirmation. Someone had entered. Her jaw tightened. The investigation had officially become dangerous. Suddenly movement flashed outside the window. A shadow. Fast. Gone. Vivian reacted instantly. She sprinted from the room, down the hallway, through the contractor housing corridor, outside, into the freezing Alaskan night. A figure dressed in dark clothing disappeared around a maintenance building. Vivian accelerated. The distance closed rapidly. 30 yards. 20. 15. The figure glanced back. For a split second, moonlight illuminated part of a face. Male. Military haircut. Then he vaulted a fence. Vivian followed, landing hard. Continuing the pursuit, the chase cut through storage yards and maintenance lots. Snow sprayed beneath their boots. The gap continued shrinking. 10 yards. 8. 5. Then headlights exploded across the road. A military truck turned unexpectedly between them. Vivian stopped, shielded her eyes. By the time the vehicle passed, the figure was gone, vanished. No footprints. No movement. Nothing. Only silence. Vivian stood alone in the freezing darkness, breathing steadily, watching, listening. Then her phone vibrated. One message. Unknown sender. No number. No identifier. Just 3 words. Stop digging now. For the first time since arriving at Kodiak, Vivian smiled. Not because the message frightened her, because it confirmed something important. She wasn't chasing ghosts anymore. The ghosts knew she was chasing them. Vivian Cross slept even less that night. The message remained burned into her thoughts. Stop digging now. Simple. Direct. And more valuable than the sender probably realized. Threats meant fear. Fear meant pressure. Pressure meant she was getting closer. By 4:45 the next morning, she was already walking through the frozen darkness toward the operations building. The Arctic wind cut through her jacket. Snow drifted across empty parking lots. Most of the base still slept. That was exactly how she preferred it. The control room was nearly deserted when she arrived. Only one overnight operator remained, half asleep, ready to leave. Morning, he muttered. Morning. Everything quiet? Too quiet. The operator laughed tiredly. That's usually a good thing. Not always, Vivian thought. She waited until he left, then immediately began reviewing the activity logs again. The same suspicious credentials appeared, the same altered timestamps, the same hidden modifications. But this time she found something new. A routing signature. Tiny. Almost invisible. Buried beneath several layers of network traffic. Her eyes narrowed. Whoever accessed the files had used a privileged terminal. Not just any terminal. One located inside the command administration wing. Vivian quickly cross-referenced the information. The result made her sit back. The access path connected directly to offices used by senior leadership. For several seconds, she simply stared at the screen. Then she copied everything. Encrypted it. Stored it. A voice interrupted her. What exactly are you doing? Vivian turned calmly. Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Holt stood in the doorway. His maintenance bag hung from one shoulder. Coffee steamed from a cup in his hand. But his eyes weren't relaxed. They were suspicious. Focused. Alert. He had been watching. Running diagnostics, Vivian said. Holt stepped closer. Diagnostics on command-level authentication logs. System integrity checks. That's not your lane. Vivian saved her work without rushing. Depends who's defining the lane. Holt didn't smile. Neither did she. The room suddenly felt smaller. The hum of the servers louder. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Holt stepped beside her console. His eyes scanned the monitor. The expression on his face changed. Only slightly. But Vivian noticed, because he recognized what he was seeing. Where did you get this? The system. This access trail shouldn't exist, yet it does. Holt stared at the data, then back at her. You've been doing this for 3 months. Doing what? Watching. His voice lowered. Everybody thinks you're some harmless contractor. Vivian remained silent. Holt crossed his arms. You're not. It wasn't a question. It was a conclusion. Vivian leaned back. Then what am I? The older officers studied her carefully. The military posture, the discipline, the calm, the complete absence of fear. Normal civilians reacted differently. He knew that. You tell me. For the first time, Vivian saw uncertainty in him. Not hostility. Not arrogance. Concern. The difference mattered. Chief, she said quietly. Have you ever seen something on a base that didn't make sense? His jaw tightened, immediately, too quickly. Interesting. Everyone sees things that don't make sense. Things they aren't senior enough to question. Now he looked directly into her eyes. A long silence followed, the kind where truths sat just beneath the surface. Then Holt glanced toward the door, making sure nobody else was nearby. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. 3 months ago, I noticed equipment transfers that shouldn't have happened. Vivian said nothing. Parts arriving without paperwork. He shook his head. Inventory disappearing. Another pause. Maintenance requests signed by people who weren't even on base. Now they were getting somewhere. Did you report it? I tried. His laugh held no humor. Guess where the complaint ended up? Vivian already knew. Senior command. Buried. Forgotten. Destroyed. Holt exhaled heavily. Nothing happened. He looked back at the screen, at the suspicious access logs, at the command-level credentials, and slowly, realization began forming. You think somebody inside this base is dirty, don't you? The question landed harder than she expected, because Holt didn't answer, and sometimes silence was the loudest answer. Suddenly, the control room door opened. Both turned instantly. Lieutenant Ethan Mercer entered, carrying coffee. The tension vanished. Holt stepped away from the console. Mercer grinned. There she is! He pointed toward Vivian, our future admiral. The familiar laughter followed, the familiar mockery. But this time, something was different. Marcus Holt didn't laugh. He watched instead, studied, thinking. The seeds of doubt had finally been planted. Mercer never noticed. Neither did Admiral Harlow when he entered 10 minutes later. But Vivian noticed, and so did someone else. Because while the officers joked and laughed around her, a notification quietly appeared on her encrypted tablet. Unauthorized access attempt detected. Source location: Contractor Housing Unit. Room 214. Her room. Again. Vivian felt the first real chill of danger crawl down her spine. The people behind the leak weren't merely watching anymore. They were actively hunting her, and the trap around everyone involved was beginning to tighten. Vivian Cross left the operations building shortly after noon. The notification about her room had stayed with her all morning. Someone had entered her quarters twice, not once. Twice. That changed everything. The first break-in could have been curiosity. The second wasn't. The second was intent. Someone was looking for something specific, or someone was trying to discover exactly who she was. The problem was that Vivian couldn't react openly. A normal investigator would report it. A normal contractor would complain. But Vivian wasn't either of those things. She was bait. And bait that runs too early scares away predators. So she did what she'd been doing for 3 months. She waited. Watched. Listened. The afternoon training exercise gave her an excuse to move around the base without drawing attention. Several units were conducting vehicle operations near the maintenance sector. Large military trucks moved constantly between storage areas. Forklifts carried equipment. Personnel crossed roads in every direction. Controlled chaos. Perfect cover for something dangerous. Vivian was halfway across a service road when instinct suddenly screamed. Not logic. Not observation. Instinct. The same instinct that had kept her alive in Iraq. The same instinct that had warned her seconds before the convoy ambush. Something was wrong. A military transport vehicle accelerated unexpectedly. Fast. Far too fast. Its engine roared. Tires spun against packed snow. The truck was heading directly toward her. People nearby froze. For one split second. Nobody understood what they were seeing. Vivian did. This wasn't an accident. She moved instantly. The truck closed the distance. 30 feet. 20. 10. At the last possible moment, she dove sideways. Her shoulder slammed into frozen pavement. The vehicle exploded past her, missed by inches, and crashed violently into a concrete barrier. The impact echoed across the entire training yard. Metal twisted. Glass shattered. Personnel shouted. Alarms immediately followed. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then everyone moved at once. Security teams rushed forward. Medics ran toward the wreckage. Officers began shouting orders. Vivian remained on the ground, not because she was injured, because she was thinking. The driver should have been stunned, possibly unconscious, maybe worse. But when security opened the vehicle, the driver's seat was empty. Gone. No body. No injured operator. No explanation. The truck had become a ghost. Commander Nathan Briggs arrived moments later. His face was grim. "Are you hurt?" Vivian slowly stood. "I'm fine." Briggs looked at the destroyed vehicle, then at her, then back again. He wasn't stupid. He understood probability. Military vehicles didn't randomly accelerate across secured training zones. Not often. Not toward specific people. Unfortunately, proving intent was something else entirely. "Security footage?" Briggs asked. One of the investigators shook his head. "Camera outage." Briggs stared. Convenient. Nobody answered, because everyone was thinking the same thing. Very convenient. Across the yard, Vivian noticed another observer, Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Holt. He wasn't watching the wreck. He was watching her, studying her reaction, studying the complete absence of panic. Normal people almost died. Vivian assessed threats. There was a difference, a significant one. Later that evening, she returned to the operations center. Most personnel were focused on the accident, exactly as she'd hoped. Distractions created opportunities. She slipped into a secured systems office and reopened the financial analysis she'd been building for weeks. This time, she expanded the search parameters. More accounts, more contractors, more transaction pathways. The screen populated slowly, then faster. Then all at once, rows of information appeared. Wire transfers, shell corporations, consulting payments, foreign accounts, layered laundering structures. Vivian leaned forward. There it was. The first real breakthrough. A cluster of payments linked to a private defense contractor, Aegis Meridian Group. The name appeared repeatedly. Different accounts. Different routes. Same destination. Millions of dollars. The payment dates made her blood run cold. Every major transfer matched suspicious intelligence accesses. Every transfer matched compromised operations. Every transfer matched military failures. The pattern was undeniable. Someone inside the military was being paid. Paid extremely well. And Aegis Meridian Group was receiving something valuable in return. Classified information. Vivian copied the entire dataset, encrypted it, backed it up. Then backed it up again. Her pulse remained steady, but inside she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Momentum. Real momentum. The pieces were finally beginning to connect. Then her secure phone vibrated. Unknown number. No caller identification. One image. Nothing else. Vivian opened it. The photo had been taken less than 10 minutes earlier. Her stomach tightened. It showed her standing beside the crashed truck. Someone had photographed her after the incident, from long range, without being seen. A single line appeared beneath the image. "You should have stayed dead." For several seconds, Vivian simply stared. Then she locked the screen, because now she knew something important. The people behind northern Iraq weren't merely protecting themselves anymore. They were scared. And scared people made mistakes. Sooner or later, one of those mistakes would expose them all. The only question was how many people would get hurt before that happened. The message stayed with Vivian all night. "You should have stayed dead." The words weren't merely a threat. They were confirmation. Whoever sent them knew about northern Iraq, knew she had survived, and most importantly, knew she was getting close. The next morning, the atmosphere around Naval Operations Center Kodiak felt different. Subtle, but different. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Security personnel seemed unusually attentive. Several officers watched her longer than normal. The tension was spreading. Vivian had seen it before. When people started worrying that secrets were about to surface, behavior changed. Mistakes followed, and mistakes created opportunities. She arrived at the UAV control room before sunrise. The building remained quiet. Most of the overnight shift was preparing to leave. Perfect timing. She logged into a secure terminal and began reviewing administrative access records. Not tactical files, not classified mission data, administrative logs. Exactly the kind of information her contractor credentials allowed her to access. 10 minutes later, she found something significant. A hidden authentication pathway. One that connected multiple suspicious file transfers. The same pathway appeared in nearly every compromised operation she had identified. Vivian began documenting everything, carefully, methodically. Every timestamp. Every access point. Every credential. Then the door opened. A familiar voice echoed through the room. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Vivian didn't need to look up. She already knew. Admiral Victor Harlow. He wasn't alone. Lieutenant Ethan Mercer stood beside him. So did 2 security officers. Interesting. Very interesting. Vivian calmly saved her work. Running diagnostics. Harlow stepped closer. His expression was different today. No amusement. No jokes. No arrogance. Only anger. "You're accessing systems outside your authority." "No, sir." "You expect me to believe that?" "I expect you to read the authorization policy." Mercer laughed, still pretending you're smarter than everyone else. Vivian ignored him. Harlow's face darkened. For several seconds, he simply stared at the monitor. Then something happened. Something small. Something most people wouldn't have noticed. Fear. Only a flicker. Gone. Almost immediately. But Vivian saw it. Because Harlow recognized what was on the screen. He knew exactly what she was looking at. And that terrified him. The realization hit Vivian like electricity. The Admiral wasn't guessing anymore. He knew she was a threat. That meant the timeline had accelerated. "Dismissed from the terminal," Harlow ordered. "I haven't finished." "That's not a request." Vivian slowly stood. The room had become very quiet. Even Mercer seemed uncertain. Security officers shifted their weight uneasily. Everybody sensed the confrontation escalating. Harlow pointed toward the door. "You've been interfering with military systems for months." "I've been performing my assigned duties." "No." His voice rose. "You've been digging." The statement hung in the air. Too direct. Too revealing. Vivian watched him carefully. The Admiral immediately realized his mistake. Too late. Now she knew. He knew. And they both understood. The game had changed. Unfortunately, he still held authority, at least for the moment. "Commander Briggs has already been notified," Harlow continued. "Security will conduct a formal review." Mercer folded his arms. "Maybe we'll finally find out who you really are." Vivian almost smiled. Not yet. Soon. But not yet. An hour later, she sat inside a security interview room. Commander Nathan Briggs occupied the chair across from her. A folder rested on the table. The room smelled faintly of coffee and printer toner. Briggs looked exhausted. "Help me understand something." Vivian remained silent. "You've been involved in every suspicious audit on this base. I investigate system irregularities. You also seem to attract trouble. The truck wasn't my fault." "No." He rubbed his forehead. "No, I don't think it was." For the first time, genuine concern appeared in his eyes. Briggs wasn't corrupt. Conflicted, maybe, but not corrupt. Unfortunately, before he could continue, the door burst open. A security officer entered quickly. "Sir." Briggs turned. "What?" The officer hesitated, then handed over a document. Briggs read it. His expression immediately changed. "What is it?" Vivian asked. The commander looked uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. This came directly from Admiral Harlow. Vivian already knew she wasn't going to like the answer. Briggs sighed, then pushed the paper across the table. Official detention order. Her name appeared at the top. Reason: unauthorized access to military systems. Suspicion of security violations. Vivian stared at it, then laughed softly. Briggs blinked. "You think this is funny?" "No." She folded the paper. "I think it's predictable." 2 military police officers entered moments later. Professional. Respectful. But firm. One stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." Around the base, rumors spread instantly. The mysterious contractor had finally been caught. People gathered in hallways. Whispers followed her. Mercer watched from a distance, smiling. certain he had been right all along. Vivian walked calmly between the MPs. No resistance. No argument. No fear. Because she understood something nobody else did. Her classified check-in was scheduled for 1600 hours. If she missed it, protocols would activate. Automatic protocols. The kind created specifically for deep cover operations. The kind designed for situations exactly like this. As the heavy detention cell door closed behind her, Vivian checked the time. 15:07. 53 minutes remained. Outside the cell, her enemies celebrated. Inside the cell, Vivian Cross waited, and somewhere far beyond Kodiak, a clock had already started counting down. Vivian Cross sat alone inside the detention cell. The room was small. Concrete walls, steel bench. A single reinforced door. No windows. No distractions. Just silence. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. 15. 21. 39 minutes until her classified check-in. Outside, the base continued operating normally. Personnel attended meetings. Aircraft launched. Officers reviewed reports. Nobody realized an invisible countdown had already begun. Vivian leaned back against the wall, closed her eyes, and breathed. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. Hold. The same rhythm that had carried her through firefights, the same rhythm that had kept her alive beneath burning wreckage in northern Iraq, the same rhythm that prevented fear from becoming panic. A sound interrupted her thoughts. Footsteps. Several sets. Approaching quickly. The cell door opened. Commander Nathan Briggs entered first. Behind him came 2 military police officers. Briggs looked troubled. Very troubled. Commander? Vivian opened her eyes. Yes? We have a problem. Her expression didn't change. What kind of problem? The kind that just shut down half the command network. Interesting. Very interesting. Briggs stepped aside. You're coming with us. The MPs escorted her through the detention facility, down hallways, through security checkpoints, toward the operations center. Personnel filled the corridors. Everyone seemed tense, confused. Nervous. Emergency notifications flashed across monitors throughout the base. Restricted access alerts. Authentication warnings. Audit processes running automatically. Nobody understood why. Vivian did. The protocol had activated. At exactly 1600 hours, when she missed her check-in, an automated safeguard had triggered. 3 months of collected evidence was now protected. Locked. Verified. And impossible to erase. The closer they moved toward the command center, the louder the atmosphere became. Officers rushed between workstations. Technicians shouted updates. Security teams reviewed access records. Something enormous was unfolding. When Vivian entered the room, she immediately saw Admiral Victor Harlow. He stood near the primary command console, angry, sweating, trying desperately to regain control. Lieutenant Ethan Mercer stood nearby. His confidence had disappeared. Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Holt was staring at multiple screens. Commander Briggs led Vivian forward. The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward her. Harlow pointed immediately. There she is. His voice carried across the room. The source of this mess. Vivian remained calm. What happened? You know exactly what happened. I don't. These audits. He slammed a hand against the console. These system locks. These investigations. The room listened carefully, because for the first time, Harlow sounded frightened. Not angry. Frightened. Suddenly a technician spoke. Sir. Everyone turned. The young technician pointed at the screen. More files. Additional audit results appeared. Hundreds of records. Thousands of records, file transfers, authentication histories, financial anomalies, years of hidden activity rising to the surface. The room became very quiet. Then one of the MPs moved toward Vivian, trying to reposition her away from the main consoles. His hand caught her sleeve. The fabric tore. Only slightly. But enough. The room froze. A tattoo became visible on her forearm, black ink, weathered by time. A military insignia, unlike anything most people had ever seen. Marcus Holt stepped forward immediately. His eyes widened. No way. Master Chief Keegan had just entered the room. He saw the tattoo and stopped walking. The color drained from his face. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Keegan whispered something, almost to himself. Raven Shield. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Holt looked at him. What? Keegan didn't look away from the tattoo. Task Force Raven Shield. Silence. Absolute silence. Mercer frowned. I've never heard of it. Most people haven't. Keegan's voice sounded distant, like he was remembering something. Because most people aren't supposed to. Now everyone was staring at Vivian, including Admiral Harlow, for the first time since she'd arrived at Kodiak. He looked uncertain. Vivian calmly pulled her sleeve back into place, but the damage was done. The room had seen enough. Questions exploded instantly. What is Raven Shield? Who are you? What does it mean? Harlow stepped forward, his confidence returning slightly. It's a tattoo. He forced a laugh. Nothing more. Vivian slowly reached into her jacket pocket. Every eye followed the movement. The room became completely still. She withdrew a single card. Black. Minimal. Official. Not a contractor badge, not a civilian credential, something entirely different. She handed it to Briggs. Run it. Briggs stared, then inserted the card into a secure reader. The system processed. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. Then every monitor in the room changed simultaneously. A classified authorization screen appeared. Access level. Sovereign. Status. Active. Personnel record. Commander Vivian Cross. Tab Force Raven Shield. Project Phantom Horizon. Special Access Authority. A photograph appeared beside the file. The same woman. Combat uniform. Military decorations. Operational credentials. And beneath the image, a line that made the entire room stop breathing. Statins. Officially deceased. Restricted classification. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Mercer's mouth slowly opened. Holt stared in disbelief. Briggs looked stunned. Keegan simply nodded, as though every suspicion he'd carried for months had finally been confirmed. Only Admiral Victor Harlow remained frozen. Because at that exact moment, he realized the contractor he had mocked, the woman he had arrested, the person he thought he controlled, had never been a contractor at all. She had been hunting him from the very beginning. For several seconds after the file appeared, nobody in the command center moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. The monitors continued displaying Commander Vivian Cross's classified personnel record. Officially deceased. Task Force Raven Shield. Project Phantom Horizon. Special Access Authority. The words glowed across every screen like a judgment. Lieutenant Ethan Mercer stared in disbelief. The woman he had mocked for 3 months. The woman he had called a contractor. A fraud. A nuisance. She wasn't any of those things. She was something far beyond his understanding. Across the room, Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Holt slowly sat down. His knees suddenly felt weak. Pieces were falling into place. The military bearing, the discipline, the scars. The way she never reacted to insults. The way she watched everything. The way she seemed impossible to intimidate. It all made sense now. Master Chief Dan Keegan simply nodded. His instincts had been right from the beginning. Admiral Victor Harlow was the only one who refused to accept it. This proves nothing. His voice sounded desperate. The confidence that had defined him for months was cracking. It's a file. He pointed at the screens. Files can be forged. Nobody responded because nobody believed him. Not anymore. Commander Nathan Briggs looked at the authentication logs, then at the clearance validation, then back at Harlow. The verification had come directly from systems nobody on this base could manipulate. Everyone knew it. Harlow knew it too, but before anyone could answer, a new sound rolled across the base. Deep, powerful, unmistakable. Rotor blades. The room turned toward the windows. The sound grew louder, closer. Then louder still. Outside, personnel began pointing toward the sky. Security teams rushed toward observation points. Vehicles stopped moving. Conversations ended. Everyone looked upward. 4 Black Hawk helicopters appeared above the snow-covered coastline, flying fast, flying low, flying directly toward Kodiak. No scheduled arrival existed. No notification had been sent. No welcoming party had been arranged. These aircraft weren't visiting. They were responding. Vivian watched quietly, exactly on time. The helicopters crossed above the base perimeter. Snow exploded beneath them. Personnel shielded their eyes from the storm of ice and wind. The aircraft descended toward the primary landing zone. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect formation. Perfect precision. Every soldier watching understood immediately. This wasn't routine. Something major was happening. Inside the command center, Harlow's face lost color. He looked at Vivian, then toward the helicopters, then back at the screens. The realization was beginning to spread, like poison, like panic, like truth. The first helicopter touched down. Its side door opened instantly. Operators emerged first, heavily armed, professionally equipped. Faces hidden behind cold expressions and mirrored eyewear. The kind of security detail assigned only to the highest-ranking officials. The second helicopter landed, then the third, then the fourth. More personnel emerged. More security. More authority. The entire base had fallen silent. Vivian checked the clock. 16:34. Exactly 34 minutes after the emergency protocol activated. Faster than expected. Even she was impressed. The command center doors suddenly opened. A young officer rushed inside, breathing hard. "Sir?" Nobody answered. The officer swallowed, then looked directly at Commander Briggs. 4 generals just arrived. Silence. Again. Mercer blinked. 4? Yes, sir. Nobody visited remote Alaskan bases with 4 generals. Nobody. Not unless something had gone catastrophically wrong, or catastrophically right. The officer continued. They're requesting immediate access to the command center. Requesting. The word made Keegan almost laugh. When 4 generals arrived with armed escorts, they weren't requesting anything. They were informing. Outside the windows, personnel lined the pathways, watching, whispering, wondering. The door opened again. This time nobody announced them. They didn't need announcements. Authority entered the room before they did. 4 senior officers stepped through the doorway. Service dress uniforms, combat ribbons, stars reflecting beneath fluorescent lights. The weight of decades of command seemed to enter with them. Every person in the room instinctively straightened. General Eleanor Voss led the group. 3 stars. J.S.O.C. Legendary reputation. Behind her walked General William Drake, General Margaret Kane, and General Jonathan Pierce. The room froze. Vivian remained perfectly still. The generals stopped. For a brief moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Every eye watched, waiting. Then General Eleanor Voss looked directly at Vivian Cross and smiled. A small smile, but real. Her hand rose sharply, a perfect military salute. The room exploded with gasps. Mercer nearly dropped his tablet. Holt stared in disbelief. Commander Briggs looked genuinely stunned. Even Keegan's eyes widened. Then the impossible happened. The other 3 generals immediately snapped to attention, and saluted as well. 4 generals, 4 salutes, directed toward the woman everyone believed was a contractor. The silence became overwhelming. Vivian slowly returned the salute. Her posture changed instantly, subtle, but unmistakable. No longer hiding, no longer pretending, no longer enduring. Commander Vivian Cross stood exactly as she truly was, an officer, a warrior, a ghost who had returned from the dead. And across the room, Admiral Victor Harlow finally understood. The investigation wasn't coming. The investigation had been standing beside him for 3 months, and now it had brought the highest levels of command with it. The command center remained frozen. 4 generals had just saluted a woman who, only hours earlier, had been sitting alone inside a detention cell. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew where to look. Lieutenant Ethan Mercer stared at Vivian Cross as if seeing a ghost. In a way, he was. For 3 months, he had mocked her, doubted her, humiliated her. Now every memory felt like a punch to the stomach. Across the room, General Eleanor Voss lowered her salute and turned toward Admiral Victor Harlow. The warmth vanished from her expression instantly. What remained was pure command authority. Admiral Victor Harlow. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. Step away from the console. Harlow didn't move. The room watched. Nobody breathed. General, there has been a misunderstanding. No. Voss took one step forward. There hasn't. Two operators from her security detail moved into position. Not aggressively, professionally. The kind of movement that communicated certainty, not possibility. Harlow looked around the room, searching for support, for allies, for anyone willing to help. He found none. Even Commander Briggs avoided eye contact. Even Marcus Holt remained silent, because everyone had seen the evidence, and everyone knew more was coming. Vivian stepped toward the main console. The system audit was still running. Thousands of files continued processing, cross-referencing, verifying, building a picture of years of corruption. A technician suddenly spoke. "Ma'am." Vivian looked over. The young analyst pointed at the screen. "You need to see this." Additional files appeared. New connections. New timelines. New names. The room grew quiet again. Vivian's eyes moved rapidly across the data. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then her expression hardened. General Voss noticed immediately. "What is it?" Vivian zoomed in. One particular name appeared repeatedly, again, and again, and again. Every major intelligence leak, every compromised operation, every suspicious transfer, the same name connected to all of them. A cold feeling settled over the room, because everyone recognized it. General Richard Blackthorne. Nobody spoke. Nobody wanted to. The implications were too large, too dangerous. Too impossible. General Blackthorne wasn't just another officer. He was one of the most respected commanders in the military. Decorated. Connected. Powerful. A man trusted at the highest levels of government. And according to the data, he was involved. Commander Briggs broke the silence. "That's impossible." Vivian slowly shook her head. "No." Her voice was calm, controlled. Dangerously controlled. "It's not." She continued reviewing the records. Every new file made the situation worse. Financial transfers, communications, authorizations. All roads led to Blackthorne. Then she found something else, something that made her blood run cold. A classified operational briefing, dated 2 years earlier. Northern Iraq. The convoy mission. Her mission. The room suddenly felt smaller. The memory hit hard. Burning vehicles, gunfire, blood. Noah Bennett. Ryan Fletcher. 17 dead operators. Vivian opened the file. Everyone watched. The original route appeared first. Safe. Verified. Low threat probability. Then another version appeared. Modified. Adjusted. Redirected. Straight into the kill zone. The authorization signature sat at the bottom. General Richard Blackthorne. Silence. Absolute silence. General Voss slowly lowered her eyes. The weight of the discovery hit everyone at once. "He sent us there." Vivian's voice barely rose above a whisper. Nobody interrupted. "He changed the route." Her jaw tightened. "He changed the threat assessment." The room remained motionless. Every person understood exactly what she was saying. The convoy hadn't stumbled into an ambush. The convoy had been delivered into one. Vivian stared at the screen. For 2 years, she had carried questions. For 2 years, she had replayed every decision, every turn, every order, wondering if she could have done something differently. Now she finally had an answer. They never had a chance. The betrayal started before the mission even began. General Voss exhaled slowly. "When did he leave?" Commander Briggs immediately checked the base activity logs. His face darkened. 22 minutes ago. Vivian looked up. "What?" Briggs swallowed. He signed out and departed the installation. The room erupted. Questions. Orders. Movement. Operators rushed toward communication stations. Security teams activated pursuit protocols. Helicopters prepared for immediate launch. But Vivian already knew. They were late. Far too late. Blackthorne had seen the signs. He had known something was happening. Known Harlow was collapsing. Known the investigation was closing in. And he had run. General Voss slammed a hand against the table. The sound echoed through the room.
Damn it! Nobody had ever heard her curse before.
That alone told everyone how serious this was.
Vivian stared at Blackthorn's disappearing trail.
Years of corruption,
Years of deaths,
years of betrayal,
all connected to one man.
and now he was gone, at least for the moment.
She looked at the evidence one final time.
Then at General Voss.
We're not done.
The general met her eyes.
No.
Vivian's voice became cold,
Focused.
determined. The Admiral was never the target.
Around the room,
People slowly began to understand.
Harlow had been important,
Dangerous.
corrupt.
But he wasn't the architect.
He was a piece.
A pawn who thought he was a king.
The real enemy had been standing above everyone the entire time.
And now the hunt had become far bigger than a single base.
Far bigger than a single arrest. Far bigger than anyone had imagined.
Because somewhere beyond Kodiak,
General Richard Blackthorn was running. And Vivian Cross had spent 2 years learning exactly how to hunt men who believed they could disappear. The sun was setting over Kodiak when Admiral Victor Harlow was finally escorted from the command center. His hands weren't cuffed, not publicly. Senior officers were rarely treated that way, but everyone understood what was happening. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed, and the empire he thought would protect him had already begun collapsing. Personnel lined the hallways as military police escorted him away. Nobody spoke. Nobody saluted. Nobody came to his defense.
the silence was worse than any accusation.
Vivian watched him disappear around a corner.
For months she had imagined this moment.
The man responsible for leaking intelligence.
The man who had profited from betrayal.
The man who had helped get American operators killed. Yet when the moment finally arrived, she felt no satisfaction, only emptiness.
Because Harlow wasn't the reason Noah Bennett was dead.
He wasn't the reason Ryan Fletcher never made it home. He wasn't the man who changed the convoy route. That honor belonged to someone else, General Richard Blackthorn, and Blackthorn was still free. Hours later, the command center had transformed into a war room. Analysts filled every workstation. Intelligence officers reviewed files. Legal teams assembled prosecution packages. Secure communications flowed non-stop between Kodiak, Fort Eisenhower, and Washington. The investigation had exploded far beyond a single base. Commander Nathan Briggs approached Vivian, carrying a tablet. "You need to see this." She accepted it. The screen displayed a growing list of arrests. 3 officers, then 6, then 9. By midnight, the number had climbed higher. Aegis Meridian Group was unraveling. Bank accounts were frozen. Contracts suspended. Evidence seized. The network was bleeding. General Eleanor Voss stepped beside her. "We're seeing connections across 6 installations." Vivian nodded. "How bad?" Voss looked toward the screens.
Worse than we thought.
Several names appeared. Senior officers, contractors, intelligence analysts, political facilitators, people who had spent years hiding behind bureaucracy and influence. The corruption had roots everywhere.
For a moment, neither woman spoke.
Then Voss turned toward her. "You've done enough." Vivian looked up. The general's expression softened slightly.
Not much.
Just enough. 3 months undercover. She folded her arms. 2 years officially dead. Another pause. "You could step away now." Vivian already knew what came next. A training command. An instructor position. A desk. A life. Normal. Or as normal as someone like her could ever hope for. "You've earned it," Voss said. The room remained busy around them. Nobody listened. Nobody interrupted. Vivian thought about it. Not because she was tempted, because she wanted to be honest. For a brief moment, she imagined it. Teaching young operators. Watching sunsets without looking for threats. Sleeping through the night. Remembering Noah and Ryan, without also remembering the explosions. Then the image vanished. Because reality was different. Blackthorn was still running. And somewhere out there, people who had profited from betrayal still believed they were safe. "No, ma'am." Voss smiled slightly. The answer hadn't surprised her. "I didn't think so." Several hours later, Vivian finally returned to her temporary quarters. The small room looked exactly as it had 3 months earlier. The same bed. The same desk. The same window overlooking the frozen coastline. Only now, the mission was over. At least this mission.
She sat on the edge of the bed, allowed herself 60 seconds of silence. No investigation, no cover identity, no pretending. Just breathing. 4 counts in, hold. 4 counts out, hold. Then her secure tablet chimed. 1 new message, unknown sender. Vivian immediately sat upright. Only a handful of people possess the ability to bypass military routing systems. She opened it. No text. Only an image. Her stomach tightened instantly. The photograph showed a dusty road, burned vehicles, smoke. Northern Iraq. 2 years earlier, her convoy. The ambush. Someone had taken the picture from a distance, from above, watching, waiting, observing. The image contained a timestamp, and in the corner, barely visible, stood a single figure on a rooftop, too far away to identify, but close enough to confirm something terrifying. Someone had witnessed the attack. Not after it happened, during it. Someone had been there. A second file accompanied the photograph. 4 words. Tower 4 sends regards. Vivian stared at the screen. The room suddenly felt colder. For months, she had believed the conspiracy ended with Blackthorn. Now she wasn't so sure. The message felt deliberate, calculated. Like an invitation or a challenge. She saved the file, encrypted it, created 3 backups, then opened a reply window. For several moments, she considered what to write. Finally, she typed 4 simple words. Tomorrow. Not tonight. She hit send. The message vanished into secure channels. Somewhere, someone would receive it, and somewhere, someone would realize she was coming. Vivian walked to the window. The Alaskan sky glowed with fading orange light. Beautiful. Peaceful. Deceptive. Because beyond that horizon, another mission was already beginning. Another identity. Another hunt. Another ghost. Behind her, the tablet displayed the final investigation summary. Dozens arrested. Millions recovered. Corruption exposed. Lives potentially saved. Justice had won a battle, but not the war. Vivian closed her eyes, thought about Noah Bennett, thought about Ryan Fletcher, thought about every operator who never came home because somebody valued money more than honor. Then she opened her eyes again, focused. Steady. Ready. Tomorrow would bring new orders, new enemies, new shadows. And Commander Vivian Cross would step into them willingly. Because the people who mocked her rank had misunderstood something fundamental. Rank wasn't what made her dangerous. Authority wasn't what made her dangerous. What made her dangerous was that she never stopped. Not when the trail went cold. Not when powerful people stood in the way. Not when entire systems tried to bury the truth. And certainly not now. Somewhere in the darkness, Richard Blackthorn was running. Somewhere beyond him, Tower 4 was waiting. And somewhere deep inside herself, Vivian felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The hunt wasn't over. The hunt had only just begun.